Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cognition podcast. As always, I am one of your hosts, Justin Hutchins, or Hutch. I am an innovation principal at Trace3 and the author of the book, The Language of Deception, Weaponizing Next Generation AI.
And I am Len Noe, technical evangelist for CyberArk, as well as transhuman and author of the upcoming, soon-to-be-released book, Human Hacked, My Life and Lessons as the World's First Augmented Ethical Hacker.
And as always, kind of the usual routine, we're going to first talk about a few news articles that really stood out to us as being interesting, and then jump right into the main segment. So for news today, we're going to be talking about the coordinated attack on the Hezbollah leaders that we saw with essentially a hardware supply chain attack against communication devices. We're going to look at OpenAI's new reasoning model that they just released. And then we're also going to talk about Donald Trump's announcement of his entry into the world of cryptocurrency. And then rolling out of that, we are going to enter the main segment where we are going to talk about the future of post-AGI economics. So basically, once we hit that point of artificial general intelligence and AI surpasses humans in pretty much all capacities, what does that look like for the economics of the future? So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into the news. And this first one is definitely something that is unprecedented in terms of the scale of anything that we've seen before. So just to set the stage of what happened here. So there was a large number of communication devices that were possessed and being used by Hezbollah leaders. So this was a combination of both pagers and walkie-talkies. And in a coordinated attack, apparently there was some type of logic that was embedded in these devices that allowed for the remote coordinated detonation of essentially thousands of devices. This resulted in multiple different owners of these devices being killed. I think the last that I saw was well over 30 people that died in this attack, thousands others that were injured. And I think really why we wanted to highlight it here is I think it parallels a lot of what we're seeing in terms of supply chain attacks on the cybersecurity side, but obviously with very real world physical implications. And like I said, something on a scale of nothing we've ever seen before. Lynn, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I thought, this is, to my knowledge now, this is one of the few times we can really see where something in a digital capacity can be used as a cyber weapon. The first thing that it reminded me of was the Stuxnet attacks back in the day, where a digital code caused, physical damage in centrifuges. But this is something completely unprecedented in additional capacity of. This opens the door to this kind of attack everywhere else now, I did some real interesting research into this, and this has got to have been something that was planned for a long time. The one thing in common is all of these devices from all of the news sources that I read basically entered into the country 5 months ago. So this has had, whatever this was, this has been something that's been planned long, and the infiltration of not just the supply chains but just communications. I mean, this is cyber on a level we've never seen before.
For me, one of the things that this serves as is a wake-up call. Obviously, in this case, there was no real intention after the payload was detonated to try to conceal the fact that these devices were tampered with. Obviously, if you have a device blow up, especially if you have thousands of devices of the same type blow up at the same time, you know that they were tampered with at some point in the supply chain. But it does make you wonder at this level of scale and at this level of infiltration into the devices that were actively being used by an entire group. Yeah, are there other ones that have less obvious payloads that are, so it just makes you wonder, are entire communication devices, entire chains of devices or groups of devices completely compromised completely without our awareness? In the same way that, to your point, these people were operating for months, if not years, with these devices without any awareness of the fact that they were compromised.
This is the kind of thing that, makes me really concerned for our safety here, in the United States, as well as all the rest of, the non-warring nations. Excuse me. If these things can be used in wartime, we've talked about the concept of dwell time before, a lot on this program, as well as, within the cybersecurity industry in general. This is a physical dwell time. And with something like this could be, to what we were just saying, you could have something sitting on the shelf for the next 6 months. We don't know, and that, that kind of technology, as well as the ability to implement it, takes the idea of hacking or compromise to a much more physical level. And it's scary when we start seeing some of this type of cyber stuff happening out in the public eye, because, if this type of thing is capable, what else is beyond just other, communication devices? I mean, this is just wow.
Agreed. All right. So the next one is OpenAI, since they obviously need to consistently stay in the latest news. They did release a new model, which is their first, as they call it, reasoning model. And this one actually has a lot of history behind it. So this was the one that presumably everybody believes was what Ilya saw. And I don't know if you may or may not remember, but back in when there was the attempted ouster of Sam Altman, when they very briefly terminated him from his role as CEO of OpenAI, it was at largely the person that led those calls was Ilya Sutskever, who is their chief researcher and scientist there at OpenAI. And there was kind of this meme that went around of what did Ilya see? What concerned him so much in terms of safety and risk in regard to the advancement of AI technology that he felt like he needed to take the actions that he did to try to have Sam Altman removed. And of course, we all know how that ultimately played out. Sam Altman was then reinstated after both Microsoft as well as many members at OpenAI got back in his corner. But it took some time to ever see the results of kind of what. So there were a lot of leaks about this model called Q-Star, which was a reasoning model. More recently, Sam Altman and OpenAI has teased the model name of Strawberry, which was also more or less the same concept of a reasoning system. And now upon release, we're seeing this first preview model of O1. And I will say that the benchmarks that this thing is achieving are staggering and scary. I mean, you look at now PhD level math, and GPT-4o, which was already a very impressive model, was only achieving about 13% success on PhD level applied mathematics. And this system 4.0 is, or sorry, O1 is O1 is now achieving 83%, so a 70% increase in graduate PhD level applied mathematics. Not only that, but it's also seen significant increases in its capability to do coding and performance. So if you watch the previews that OpenAI released related to this, one of the previews that they had was a discussion with the team at Devon. And if you recall, a few episodes back, we did a segment on Devon where we talked about this new AI digital coding engineer that really did kind of present itself as the future replacement of coders and developers. And even that team was saying that their solution, now that they've begun to integrate it with this O1 model, is orders of magnitude more impressive than it was with the previous models. So for everybody that is kind of saying that the advancement in AI capabilities are slowing down, I think that this is a wake-up call for still how fast some of these advancements are moving.
This thing scares the living shit out of me.
Yeah, it's we're moving fast.
you know, we are that was the one point that I wanted to really stick on, is just the advancement over time. And if we just extrapolate on this, you know, it gained 80%, you know, this last time. What happens when it goes to where, you know, it's improving by, you know, 200, 300 times every generation? You know, you remember that old expression of we don't know what we don't know?
Unknown unknowns.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that, you know, we keep doing this a couple of more revolutions and we may not know, but it will.
Yep. And it seems like we're going to do those iterations. There's still tons of money being thrown at this thing. So
absolutely.
One thing that I did notice, so I played with the preview on it. It doesn't have the ability to upload documents.
Yeah, I played with it a little bit too. You know, now one thing that they do say is in their marketing on this is this one is meant to slow down and think a little bit before responding. So if you are going to go play with this thing, it's not going to give you that the minute you type your question and hit enter, it's not going to start spitting out an answer automatically. It's going to take a second, you know, and you know, I hate to use the word thinking, but, you know, I'm just waiting for that pulsing red light that, you know, I know what you're trying to do, Hutch, and I can't allow it. But yeah, this thing is impressive. I never thought we would see stuff like this in our lifetime, man.
Yep. And I feel like we're saying that consistently, episode after episode. So it just feels like month over month, we are just seeing astounding breakthroughs in regard to what these systems are capable of.
You know, I'm waiting until we get to that point where they're starting to, you know, get their own languages and we have to try and figure out the new Rosetta Stone to understand what the machines are talking about. But I want to kick this one off. So this one to me was one of the most unusual yet should have been expected kind of things. So Donald Trump, and we are not going to get into politics on this. So, but for all of you that want to know which side Justin and I are on, keep guessing. But Trump has now entered the cryptocurrency world with his project World Liberty Financial. So he has essentially launched his own cryptocurrency. And, you know, Justin and I took a few minutes, you know, before we started today. And you know, we came at this from two completely different directions. So I'm going to let Hutch handle this from one side. But the first two things that jumped in my mind is you could not pick a single cryptocurrency outside of possibly Monero that people are going to try and go after. I mean, there is going to be new attacks. There is going to be probably new techniques to try and go after blockchain. And for all of you with your Bitcoin and your Ethereum, I don't think they're going to be going after those at first. But the side of this that really scared me the most was now we have a celebrity who has essentially entered the crypto market and is basically designing his own parallel track for currency. You know, so me being me, I started thinking about this. What, you know, and Hutch told me not to give anybody this idea, but I have to improve my point. Is, you know, what happens when we get Swifty coin or we get LeBron coin? You know, the moral of the story here is these are essentially secondary markets to the US dollar. And if more and more people start investing in their favorite celebrities, not only through their media, their whatever their products they're selling, but they're actually investing in their, you know, separate currencies, what happens to the continuation of the US dollar? What happens to the credit of the US dollar when we are essentially fracturing our currency?
Yeah, I don't want to live in a world where Swifty coin is a thing.
Well, I think I may have just, you know, caused someone to get the inspiration to make it. And if you do, remember me and Hutch. You know, we'll put our Bitcoin wallet addresses down in the bottom for any donations or proceeds or royalties.
Yeah, so a couple things that I was looking at on this was, for starters, of course, I see any kind of nation state leader or former nation state leader announcing involvement with cryptocurrency. And I immediately thought of many of the other digital currencies that we're seeing coming out of nation states. I mean, China has one. You've also got one out of Nigeria. There's many other countries, but pretty much all of these other instances of nation-backed cryptocurrencies are just digital currencies that are centralized and kind of governed by that nation state. That's not the case here. So this is, at least by the way that it's being announced, advertised, it is supposedly going to be a decentralized currency, which I guess if there is any silver lining here, that's probably what it is it is decentralized, and that's how cryptocurrency should be. That was always the intent from the beginning. That being said, even if it is on record decentralized, I think it's really hard for anybody to embrace a cryptocurrency from anybody that is that involved in politics or government. Again, the entire point of cryptocurrency was always supposed to be decentralized. And even if it is, again, on paper that, it reminds me of so Meta, the parent company of Facebook, a few years back, started looking at doing their own cryptocurrency that was called Libra. And they pumped the brakes. There was a lot of outcry about concerns over conflicts of interest, over just the idea that Facebook itself, or Meta, has way too much power and really should not be that close to a decentralized currency and a cryptocurrency. So, of course, they stopped it. And this reminds me of that. Like, while it on paper is decentralized, it is way too close to
This is an Icarus situation. You are flying way too close to the sun.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of challenges here. I think that a lot of people are going to cry foul as far as potential conflicts of interest. And I don't know. I just don't like the idea of nation state entanglement with cryptocurrency. I do think that it's interesting, though, when you look at the Trump administration, which is, and just speaking in terms of facts here, the Trump administration is more isolationist than most other administrations that we've seen. There's a much greater emphasis on U.S. first trade policies and trade tariffs and restrictions related to that. And one of the interesting thing is, one of the easiest ways to circumvent trade restrictions and tariffs is cryptocurrency. So it is interesting to see the Trump administration, which is very heavy-handed on the tariffs, also advancing their efforts in cryptocurrency as well.
You know, the one thing that I'll throw out on that one is apparently this is the brainchild of Barron Trump, not, because honestly, if you look at a lot of Trump's former statements about cryptocurrency in general, he was always said it was stupid and it was not real investment. So this may not be so much Trump Donald as much as it might be his son Barron, and that's a whole different generation. So this may be just playing off the name, but at the same time, it's still, to me, it's just scary because this sets precedent for, the next billionaire, who wants to try and, start their own currency. I'd rather keep the money in the system if we can. I'd like to keep it paper for as long as we can.
even less with paper, right?
Yeah, you can actually, do some side work. One thing to remember, everybody, once we go to the complete digital currencies, the idea of doing some side work for, $20 for your buddy to change his brakes, it don't work no more. You're going to have to report that stuff. There's no way to pay somebody unless it's going to be in trade. We're going to be the most advanced, work nation in the world, and all side work and most of the commerce will be done through barter.
Yeah, I do think that's an interesting thing about crypto, is that it was the intent originally was that it was a more anonymous way to be able to engage in financial transactions. And with the different brokering platforms and everybody else's involvement in kind of managing digital wallets. I mean, it's become anything but anonymous. But I do think that there's still that illusion. People think that it is.
Oh yeah, but no. Let's be honest. There's still one. We still have one. Long live Monero. All right, let's get into the nightmare section.
All right, so main segment. I think so. Again, we're going to talk about post-AGI economics. I think it probably helps this set the stage here by first talking about what AGI is. I think if you tune in, you probably already have a pretty good idea. But of course, AGI is artificial general intelligence. It is this idea that we get to the point where artificial intelligence systems are at least as proficient as humans are at nearly all tasks. And so it was interesting. I was talking with somebody the other day, and we were talking about the scaling race and the fact that we are seeing each of these big tech giants just dump tons of money into building bigger and bigger neural network systems that are, and she asked me the question of why are we continuing to put all this money there? Why do they continue to dump more and more money and spending so much on this? And I mean, the truth is, it is because, I mean, even if you look at OpenAI's mission statement, it is they are attempting to achieve AGI for the benefit of humanity. And so we have to think about some of the foregone conclusions of if they do achieve their goal, which, I mean, a lot of people believe that they're on the way, otherwise the money wouldn't be flowing in. If they do achieve their goal, what does that mean for the rest of the world? And really only two things need to happen in order for our economy, the entire world as we know it, to completely transform. One, we have to reach AGI. We have to achieve a level of digital intelligence that is at least on par in all regards with human being capabilities. But then the other one is that we have to hit a point where it is economically viable to use that digital intelligence for what was traditionally done by human labor. So once machines are capable of doing everything that humans are, and it is cheaper to employ those machines than it is humans, the entire concept of an economy built around human labor completely dissolves. I think one of the other things that I think is fascinating here is just the question of, and I think it's an important preliminary conversation, is can we even arrive at AGI? And so there's a lot of constraints here, and there's a lot of obstacles that have to happen in order for us to continue scaling up the systems in the way that we have. Energy is a fascinating one that I think we've talked about in a few of the episodes that we've had here. The truth is, in order to continue to scale up these systems, we're looking at all kinds of new alternative ways to generate energy. There's been concerns about rolling out a lot of these newer data centers because of the tax that they're going to have on the electric grids of the communities that they're being deployed in. And there's even been considerations by a lot of the technology firms to co-locate nuclear power plants and other alternative forms of energy right next to these data centers, just so that they have a dedicated and constant influx of electricity and power in order to be able to run these training runs and the massive amount of inference and compute that's needed in order to execute these systems. Another one, actually, interestingly enough, is water. So a lot of communities have tried to put on the brakes for some of these data centers because of the amount of water that's needed just to cool these systems is going to be taxing on the communities. Money is another question. So right now, we still see at least a decent amount of investor sentiment and throwing more and more money at these things. But we are already starting to see grumblings of investors that are wondering where the returns are and why we're still investing so much money if we're not seeing the financial returns related to those. And so it does kind of beg the question of, do we get to AGI first, or does the interest in investment dry up because we don't get immediate enough returns?
Well, personally, I want to attach the first question first. And I think the idea that are we going to get there? Yes. And, the one thing that everything you said made absolutely great sense. But the one thing that you didn't include in that is, well, you did, but let me extrapolate. This is a race. and we can talk about the race between, say, OpenAI, Microsoft, and Google, or, we could actually look at, to the global scenario. It's not that. It's the US, it's China, it's, everybody, Russia, everybody out there is trying to get to this. I think, we're one of the few that I think has the opportunity to potentially pull it off. But let's be honest, we've seen the government relocate people for putting in a road. You think when it comes to national security, they won't upend an entire community and go, guess what? You don't have to worry about, the data center moving in because you're moving out. So I think from just a national perspective, we have to get there eventually, but the idea, go ahead.
What I was going to say is you mentioned this being a race, and I think you're absolutely right. But I think it's also important to highlight that this is a race where the winner of that race really is winner takes all.
Oh, absolutely.
Once somebody achieves AGI, it's game over for everybody else.
I mean, I'm sure that we'll still continue to see people try and get there. I'm sure they'll do what they can to try and steal any code or any ideas they can from the victor. But right now, in my opinion, everything when it comes to the AI is still pretty much early Linux days. Everybody's still jockeying for that industry dominance. And I mean, currently I would have to say that my money's on OpenAI, but that's not going to stop everybody from trying to get to this landmark, because this is going to be the next major point. This is going to be essentially the same moment in time where the world first learned about LLMs and AI. This is going to just getting there is going to upend society.
Well, and I think it's also going to be a launching point, because once we achieve systems that are at least as capable as human beings, we no longer have to have human beings even working on the problem of improving them. We can just have them work on improving themselves. And that's the whole typical problem that we've talked about and really has been foreshadowed in science fiction for decades now, is that point in which machines get to a level of sophistication that they are able to improve on their own architecture, on their own design, able to make breakthroughs in the same way that humans would. Once that happens, you have a system that's feeding itself. Whoever wins, whoever gets there, can then step back and just work on scaling out and distributing that system. And I mean, all bets are off. At that point, it really does become a question of how long does it take for the technology to become economically viable enough to replace you and me and everybody else that has a job.
Yep. But here's where I think this is a good enough jumping off point to get into, what does it look like? I don't think we're actually ever going to be without jobs. I just think we're going to move into a digital existence. And as crazy as this sounds, you've seen Ready Player One, I'm sure.
Yep.
But I really do think that the future of humanity is going to be a virtual existence inside of a digital world. It's going to be the only place left where actually having some type of individuality or autonomy is going to have any real value. I mean, I see us, working in some type of a metaverse, and what's the difference? Would you want to talk to a human or would you want to talk to a bot?
Tell the difference, right?
Well, but see, that's the thing. At that point, it becomes a commodity. Because there's nothing left unless you have some type of manual skill.
Yeah.
So the only place left to earn any type of money would be in the digital side of existence.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a couple of things here. I think that one of it is, fascinatingly enough, kind of just and of course this is your world, but the world of transhumanism, the idea that and I think the person that immediately comes to mind for me that's spoken of this level of integration because of AI advancement is Elon Musk, who that's really, and I know you pointed out many times he's certainly not the only player in the brain computer interface space, but that really has been how he's described his vision of, at least the long-term vision of Neuralink, is that basically if we as humanity want to keep up with the rapidly advancing capabilities of artificial intelligence and remain relevant, then integration is almost becomes a matter of necessity.
Yeah, and to that, I question it. Being a transhuman, granted, I don't have a BCI, but I've even given thought to, what that would even look like, because I mean, everybody's seen enough science fiction to think that, oh, well, you're going to have your heads up display in your eyeball, you're just going to see it. Okay, well, in order for that to happen, you've got a couple of different options. You could either replace, your eyeball, you could try and tap into the optic nerve, but we're nowhere near all of that.
No.
So, to me, you also have to look at the idea of, in order to get to something like that, the amount of money that it would require to be able to do the brain surgery, go through the healing process. And to your point, if we don't have jobs, how do you have currency? How do you have something to give in order to get these skills?
So I think that's the challenge, is if we do, let's say whatever company, let's say OpenAI does get to that point where they achieve AGI. And at that point, they have a solution that, and let's also assume the second premise, that we do get to a point where economically viable for them to use that to address many of the roles that humans currently fill in the operational workplace. We then have essentially a consolidation of wealth. Basically, all of the wealth that was previously generated by people in the workforce is going to shift to a single organization, which is the winner in this case, in this theoretical scenario, OpenAI. And so that does beg the question of, and I know that OpenAI's mission statement is create AGI for the benefit of all mankind, but we've also seen them shift significantly in terms of the way that they structure their organization, in the terms of the way that they view risk and safety. And so I have to wonder, are they really altruistic enough that if they end up in a situation where all of the world's wealth is increasingly being consolidated within their hands, I mean, what does that even look like? Do we have like a private company that then provides some kind of universal basic income? Does the government step in and regulate the wealth generation of that system that's now generating all of that? I mean, to say that it would radically transform everything about the way that the economy works, I mean, regardless of what level of socialism you mix into it, at the end of the day, we're still a capitalist society, and we're an economy that is built on labor and human
and
jobs.
If you remove that, there's nothing left. I mean, at this point, you'd have your influencers, but once again, if you don't have, I mean, all the way down to, and I'm not saying that anybody who's got a job is less than anybody else, but, waiters, valets, executives, it doesn't matter. If you don't have those jobs anymore, where does the money, at the top of the funnel come from?
So yeah, it is an interesting discussion. I think that we've had a couple politicians that were a little bit ahead of their time. Again, not endorsing politics, but at least speaking to the idea. We've had like Andrew Yang, who basically ran on basically the premise of technology is going to continue to displace jobs over time, and was already thinking in the UBI space. Again, UBI is kind of universal basic income. It's this idea that in a post-labor economy, we essentially provide people allowances for being human, for just being able to live and experience their life, because enough value is being generated outside of the requirement of them even needing to work. I think the challenge, what is going to be the challenge for most people, is how to draw that line of when we make that cutover and what that looks like. And I think for a lot of people that have been successful in their lives, it's probably going to be difficult to enter a world where now the efforts that they put towards things are no more relevant than the people that don't put that effort forth. So it's, I think for a lot of people, this kind of transformation is going to be so unsettling. It's going to be extremely polarizing. It's going to be, I think that we are going to go through and this is, I still think that,
I don't think we'll ever get there.
I think we probably will get to AGI. I think the bigger question is what that timeline looks like and does it happen in our lifetimes? I think, again, speaking to some of those constraints, I think we talked about like the energy, money, whether the investments dry up, but there's other questions about just kind of the diminishing returns of, I mean, the system that we're currently optimizing is really just built on next token prediction. And so there's the question of, do we at some point hit diminishing returns on just scaling up that process of next token prediction? Does it really get to something that is rational and capable to the point and beyond what humans are capable of? But that being said, it has consistently surprised us as far as what it's capable of doing. We were just talking about that in the news segment. So with the O1 model.
As far as I'm concerned, we're in uncharted, unprecedented territory. And I've heard this said many times, and I'll probably say it a bunch more, but I am really getting tired of living through monumental events.
Yeah.
I would really like just a plateau for, give us a couple of months, let us catch our breath. But no, man, I fear that it would never get to that point. And, yeah, you can call me the pessimist, but once these devices become viable to the point where they can be mass produced at cost, this is when I think the uprising, that we see in all of those science fiction movies, it would happen. I mean, and I'm not trying to say that
violence. By that, are you saying like human uprising against the machines? Or
yep.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, I mean, I remember when, the assembly lines back in Detroit, where I grew up, started getting more and more automated between the 80s and 2000, and it was, the animosity, the anger, the aggression that these machines were taking away just some of the line workers' jobs. I couldn't imagine going, yeah, not only are we taking some of your jobs, we're taking all of your jobs, and not just your jobs, their jobs, their jobs, their jobs, and their jobs too. So I see it more of to your polarization comment, I see polarization to the point of darn near mutiny.
I think you're right. I mean, we were already seeing the early signs of that. Remember, it wasn't more than a couple months ago that we talked about that Waymo that was set on fire that you so eloquently referred to as a barbecue.
Yes. So, I mean, people, and generationally, that's another thing. I think that as those of us in the, I'm going to say prime of our life right now.
You keep telling yourself that, buddy.
Yeah. Says the guy with the artificial knee. I know. But, the younger generations, they're growing up with this. And that's something that I think is also different, because I can see definite generational differences in terms of what is technologically acceptable, the ideas around, personally identifiable information, privacy, censorship. It's different. It's just different. And I often wonder what it would be like for somebody like me or you, who, we've dedicated most of our lives to these types of technologies and understanding them. What would it have been like if, we didn't grow up before they got here and we, eased into it and we were basically just dropped in the deep end?
Yeah, you accept the world you're born into. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because you, as a parent, it is. We know that every generation kind of looks at the generation after them and thinks those young whippersnappers and things. But it's things are so drastically different between generations now, so much more than it ever was before. Just the way that you live, the way that you interact with the world around you. I mean, just 10 years difference now, and the way that they grew up compared to the way that the generation before them grew up is. I just feel like that divide in terms of understanding really what our children are going through. It's hard to even. I mean, I have conversations with my son what's going on in school and just the technology, the phones in school, just the way that transforms the way that the entire social experience takes place is hard for me to even kind of really sympathize with because we just didn't experience it.
And back to our topic for the main segment here. Maybe that's what the currency is in the future. Maybe it's likes.
Oh man, that is not what I want to hear.
Well, I mean, if you take away everything else, I mean, what else is left?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think there was a what was that show, Black Mirror episode that was exactly it. That was what we worked towards in the future was just those blips of dopamine hits that we get from somebody else acknowledging us that we exist.
Well, just remember, since we are talking about post-AGI economics, just remember to get your Swifty coins now because they will probably be worth more later.
Jump on the Swifty bandwagon. Yep. As I mentioned previously, yeah, I fear. I think there's a lot of stupid things that have come out of technology. We talked about the NFTs before jumping into this conversation, and how dumb that whole trend was. And if we enter a whole new era of celeb coins, that on top of
well, I mean that makes sense.
It does.
Because the US dollar, there's no more dollars. So all you can do is basically invest in your alternate currencies of whatever your famous celebrity is, and they will become the next, I'd like Swifty security.
You know what's interesting is, so you mentioned investing, and I do think that is a topic that is worth acknowledging as we speak about kind of our main topic here. Is I do think that wherever we hit that transition point, and I'm not saying it's in the next couple of years, I'm not saying it's in the next decade, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But whenever we hit that transition point, I do think that it is going to solidify generational wealth for those that have been able to establish it, those that have been able to invest in the companies that are going to benefit from these. Whereas people that were still at that point of transition, the people that were still living paycheck to paycheck, at least until the point in which we can figure out that really hard transition period of what a post-AGI economic system looks like, those are the people that's going to suffer the worst or the most. And I think that's unfortunate. We're just going to see this one more thing, and there's already been so many factors that kind of continue to exacerbate that rich and poor gap and continue to make it harder and harder for the people that have already struggled. But I think that this is going to be another one of those things where those people that were able to invest prior to AGI will benefit from it, whereas those that weren't will not.
Yeah, but we're back to that same question again of if the dollar isn't worth the money that it's printed on, what is the investments worth? They're paying out in the same thing unless you can get them in some type of cryptocurrency that's going to be able to survive that kind of a crash.
All roads lead back to Swifty coin.
All roads lead back to Swifty coin.
I think on that note, we'll wrap it up, right? All right. Well, this has been an excellent conversation. Always fascinating. And so until next time, right?
You got it.
Over and out.
Peace.